The program will begin in 5 minutes. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the program will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, the program is about to begin. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is beginning.
Good morning. Good morning. Take your seats if you don't mind. That'd be great. So we don't keep you too long. Okay. Thank you. Good morning. I'm John Rattacco. I'm the interim president and CEO of the Westchester County Association, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to our first ever Regional Workforce Development Summit and our annual breakfast with the county executive. This is a great opportunity for us all to hear from renowned experts in workforce development as they share valuable insights on our region's job outlook, recruitment challenges and opportunities, obviously, and invigorate innovative programs that benefit job seekers, employers in our community. A terrific event like this would not be possible without the support of many great sponsors and partners. So I'd like to take just a moment to acknowledge them. They are Burke Rehabilitation Hospital, Con Edison, CPL, ENT and Allergy Associates, Mercy College, New York Presbyterian, PKF O'Connor Davies, Sterling National Bank, Wegmans, Westchester County Business Journal, Westchester County Office of Economic Development, Human Resource Management Association, and White Plains Hospital. Please join me in thanking them. I would also like to take a minute to thank the Westchester Marriott for hosting us today in their newly renovated ballroom. It's always great to see our local businesses investing in our future. It is my pleasure, and it truly is my pleasure, to recognize our former CEO, a gentleman who needs no introduction, a guy who's a pillar in our community, Bill Mooney. Please stand, Bill. As you know, Bill recently retired as the CEO and president of the County Association. He's now consulting with the County Association and also is consulting with Simone Properties, and he'll do a fabulous job for all of us. Congratulations, Bill. It's Bill Mooney who was the integral part in establishing the WCA's focus on workforce development. It was his vision several years ago to recognize that to have a sustained economic success, our region needs to invest in many facets of workforce development. Under Bill's leadership and in partnership with the Westchester County's Workforce Development Board, the WCA trained more than 600 individuals and placed nearly 400 job seekers with more than 250 employers, many of which are sitting here in this room, in the region through a $10 million federally funded jobs waiting program. This grant would not have been made possible without the support and leadership of Congresswoman Nita Lowey. Congresswoman Lowey could not be with us today. However, Pat Keegan is here representing her, and we thank Pat. Where are you, Pat? Thank you so much. And please thank Nita for all that she did for the WCA in our area. We are so proud to say that our program was considered the best in the nation. But as you know, there is much more to be done. Today's summit is another important milestone as we continue to focus on developing a regional workforce that is well-trained and job-ready. And lastly, I want to share with you that the WCA Search Committee, spearheaded by Jeff Menkes, has made significant progress in fielding and interviewing some great candidates for the position of permanent CEO and president. I feel that we'll be ready to make a public announcement very soon of who the new leader is, and within the next 6 to 8 weeks. Speaking of chief executives, as most of you know, the WCA has a long history of hosting our county executive at our annual breakfast. In fact, this is our 24th consecutive year that we've done so. County Executive George Latimer, who took office as the 9th County Executive of Westchester in January 2018, was born and bred in Westchester County and has extensive experience in both public and the private sector. Through his commitment to the Office of Economic Development, George and his team have made significant investments in initiatives that effectively attract and retain business and create jobs in our region. The WCA is very grateful to have the support of County Executive Latimer and his team with this event, with our ongoing workforce initiatives year-round to drive smart growth for the region. Please join me in welcoming County Executive George Latimer.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here and to see such a large crowd, and also to know that we've got such a substantive program about workforce initiatives. I have a great respect for that the Westchester County Association has prioritized this, and we think it creates a tremendous opportunity for partnership between government and the private sector. But I want to echo our interim president and CEO by recognizing Bill Mooney. We're probably going to do this, Bill, for the next few years, every time we see you. But Bill is an outstanding leader. I had the pleasure of working with him in a variety of different jobs. I bounced from one to the other. Bill stayed steady as a rock, and he helped make this organization what it is today. Bill, again. As was mentioned, I did grow up here in Westchester County. I've spent almost all of my life in it. I did have a corporate career that took me to a couple of other states for a few years. But I've seen the same changes that you've seen. And you don't have to be the same age I am to know that things are changing, and they're changing so rapidly that the strategies that made us successful a decade ago are not the strategies that will get us through the decade to come. We've seen technology take us places that we never thought we would, and I still have a little bit of that baby boomer concern about I'm going to get in a car that there's no driver of, and it's going to take me someplace automatically. But the nature of the workforce and the jobs that we have now are going to change again. I suspect it's a lot like it was 100+ years ago when all of the blacksmiths looked at this first combustion engine that became an automobile, and you know the old line, oh, get a horse. Well, you know, they got horsepower, and it changed completely transportation. It changed the way that our communities developed and grew, and it also changed the career. The blacksmith went out of business, but the wise blacksmith learned how to be a good auto mechanic and took the same basic set of skills and then advanced for the future. And change is difficult to do. It's very hard to reinvent yourself, and it's easy to say as a matter of rhetoric, but how many people now who are of a certain age and have done a certain thing for most of their life realize that they need to find the generic ability and those skills and restructure them into something else if they're going to continue to be gainfully employed and to get to the finish line. Westchester County in my youth was a county where economic development meant getting big New York City-based corporations to move to this county. And when a friend of mine's older brother got a job with IBM it was, magnificent. You now work for IBM. This is great. You're set for the rest of your life. You can already see the gold watch on your wrist at the end of your career. And Pepsi-Cola and a host of other organizations, one of which I worked for a subsidiary of. Nestle USA was based here for a number of years, General Foods and so forth. But that's not today. Today we have a different reality, and we adjust now to that reality. Small is the new big, and small meaning that there are people who may be retiring voluntarily or involuntarily from an organization. They have talent and skill, and in the fourth or fifth decade of their life, they go out and create a corporation that begins with themselves and an idea. In the most magnificent examples, it can turn into Regeneron. And in many other examples, they're very viable organizations. But we, the royal we, government and business together, the community, we have to figure out how do we incentivize that. And that's a harder incentivization than going to a single person that can come in and bring 1,000 jobs in one fell swoop, and we give them certain tax benefits or certain direct subsidies, as still happens in this nation and some of the southern states when they're recruiting business. So it's essential that the work of this organization, cooperatively with the people that we have in government, figure out how to solve this Rubik's Cube. Now, I never could solve a Rubik's Cube, to be honest with you. I worked those little damn things and never could quite get them right. And then you see some 5-year-old kid do it in like 6 minutes. Very frustrating. But it is something that can be solved, but it takes us to a way to figure that out. And it requires us in government to get outside of the normal 9 dots of the way we operate. Government operates slowly. It operates with certain legal structures. It operates with certain traditions. But it can't afford to move at that glacial speed if we're going to be the partner that the private sector needs in helping to incentivize this new workforce that's coming. And with that thought in mind, we have some of the most dynamic individuals that are working with us in government now to help make that happen. Tom Kleiner, who is with us here at the Workforce Development Board. Tom, stand up, wherever you may be in the room. Has taken on that responsibility, and that's a 2-county responsibility which both Westchester and Putnam work together on. I'm very happy that we have Bridget Gibbons, who has been both a private business owner as well as in corporation. She's our Director of Economic Development. And in some areas where you may not think there's an automatic connection, there's a connection. The director of our youth board, Dr. Damia Harris-Madden, you might think of that as being a job that involves social services and programs to needy kids, but that's part of how we're going to help refocus young people in a career direction so that they can have a productive life. Damia, please stand up. We're tasked not with solving the problem, but with being your partner at WCA. We figure out how do we take what resources we have in government, and we have some traditional resources. The industrial development incentive programs exist. We have money that we set aside for infrastructure, for certain kinds of things that will help us in terms of this. We have the responsibility to, you've all finished breakfast yet? We have the responsibility to treat sewerage, and that becomes an important part in development and growth. But in all of these different areas, it's not government working outside on its own agenda. It's government working in a partnership with organizations like this and others. And I would remind you that it was a year ago at this breakfast that I stood at this podium with John Ferrari, and we signed the deal that leased 90 acres of land toward his initiative to try to build a biotech center just in this area. That's the type of cooperation that we need to have. So what I hope we'll see over the course of the coming weeks and months, and let me go further, I hope that this is the kind of cooperation that will last beyond my administration. As sure as I am the 9th county executive, there will be a 10th, and there will be an 11th. That person may have a different demographic package than me. That person may not be in the same political party as me. And at some level, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that we set the government of Westchester County, the government that was ably run by Andy O'Rourke and Ed McCallion, as well as by Aldo Bello and Andy Spano, Rob Astorino, that we set this government as a permanent partner in economic development, not just for the winds of politics, not just because there's an election coming up, but because that is how Westchester has stayed ahead of the curve up to this point, and that's how we'll stay ahead in the days to come. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, County Executive, for your remarks, but also for your partnership with the WCA. We truly appreciate it. Now I'd like to introduce Jason Chapin, the WCA's Director of Workforce Development. Jason has over 20 years of workforce experience within the City University of New York, State University of New York, the workplace in Connecticut, and now at the WCA. Jason was the lead project manager of the aforementioned $10 million Jobs Waiting Program, and he currently oversees all WCA workforce initiatives, including a diverse committee of educators, business professionals, and government leaders. Jason's vision led to today's summit, and without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Jason Chapin.
Good morning, and welcome to the first Regional Workforce Development Summit. I want to thank Mother Nature first. A lot of times she doesn't cooperate, but we're very fortunate that everyone made it here today without any problems. I would also like to thank our sponsors, speakers, our media partner, and all of you for coming today. This is a great opportunity for us to continue great work and to begin new initiatives. And I also want to thank my colleagues at WCA and our workforce committee that helped put together today's event. We couldn't be more pleased with today's turnout, and we are excited that we are broadcasting this live on Facebook, and that we are also recording it so that you can all watch this with your colleagues afterward and talk about all the things you want to do in the talent space. I also want to mention that out front we have a resource table. A lot of our partners put some information out there that's focused on talent issues, and we hope that you will take some copies on your way out. As John mentioned in his remarks, WCA managed Jobs Waiting for 4 years. That was an incredible opportunity for us. It was also the region's largest grant-funded training and employment program to date. We're committed to building on the success of that program. We're applying for other grants. We're planning more events like today's. We want to do webinars and other events on social media to engage more people. And we are developing a training and supports resource guide for employers and employees. We know that there are incredible resources here in Westchester and the region, but sometimes it's hard for people to learn about them, and we want to help in that process. And also, I want to thank the Entergy Foundation for funding the resource guide, and also thank Ken Theobald at Entergy for making that possible. Altogether, these initiatives are designed to help establish a sustainable regional talent ecosystem. That's a long phrase, but it basically means we can do a lot more if we work together. Think of it as an enhanced partnership where colleges and other training providers work more closely with employers, and that includes BOCES and individual training providers and many others that are part of the training community, to educate, train, and prepare students for the jobs of today and tomorrow. Our vision is to create talent pipelines connecting training providers and students to employers. So now that we are done with our introductions, it's time to get to our speakers. And we've got some great speakers today. I have the great honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Jason Bram. By title, he is Regional Economist Officer at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. What most people don't know is that the Federal Reserve has two mandates, low inflation and full employment. Jason is going to give us an insightful overview of the regional job market and general trends that should help us develop a plan to recruit and retain more talent in our region. Please welcome Jason Bram.
Thanks, Jason. There are a lot of Jasons here, it seems. How do I... Okay, so I'm going to be quick, and there's a timer there to keep me on track. I'm going to basically give you a quick overview of sort of economic trends in the region. Let me start off by saying that the views I express are mine and not those of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York or the Federal Reserve System. Okay. And as you may know, the Federal Reserve System is broken into 12 districts. Our district, the second district, is that. And we sort of think of it as in 4 sections. We have upstate New York, the sort of downstate New York economy, northern New Jersey, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and Fairfield. That'll be 5, not 4. So this reminds me, there are 3 kinds of economists, the kind that can count and the kind that can't. Okay. You got to start out with a little humor. Okay, so to just give you a little preview of what I'm going to talk about, unemployment is at or near record lows. We all know that's going on nationally. It's going on in the region. New York City remains the engine of job growth, the New York City area, but especially the city itself. There are signs, though, that the economy is slowing and that businesses are having trouble finding workers, and wage growth has remained subdued. So let's start off talking about the most fundamental indicator of the labor market, the unemployment rate. In the United States, it's gotten down around 3.5%. You can see it's been trending down dramatically, reached multi-year highs during the recession, and now it's at multi-decade lows, or at or near, I should say. And that's true throughout the region. It's true in New Jersey, New York State, New York City. And it's true in even some of the local areas. And it's even true in upstate New York. I'm not going to get into that because I only have so much time. But one of the good things about the economy, but also one of the constraints to business, is that unemployment rates are very low. So what we've done here is we've gone across the region. The upper part of the bar, or I should say the total bar, represents the long-run average of employment. It's sort of the structural long-term unemployment rate, the historical rate. So you can see nationally, this is basically from 1990 to 2016. So it's a period that includes recessions and booms. The average has been 6.1. Recently, the last month, November, 3.5. Same thing in Fairfield and Hudson. New York City, you can see it's well below its long-run average, and in northern New Jersey, too. And then throughout the sort of mid-Hudson, lower Hudson Valley, it's each of the counties. It's not as dramatic as it is in New York City, but still, it's a point or more in most of these areas below the long-term average. Now, keep in mind, unemployment is based on where people live. So this is of people who live in Westchester County. Some of them work in New York. Some of them work in Dutchess County, whatever. But you can see this story that dominates the region. Now, looking at what we call payroll employment, this is based on where people work. And this is the measure I'm going to use throughout most of the presentation when I'm talking about employment. What we've done is we've created an index chart. We call it a spider chart. You'll see as I go along why we call it a spider chart. But it basically indexes employment to the beginning of the recession, which was at the end of 2007. And so the level that it's at now is basically how it's done since the recession. And this way we can put everything on the same scale. So here you see United States, which has done pretty well, and New York City, which has done exceptionally well. And you can see that growth has just been gangbusters throughout this expansion in New York City. Orange, Rockland, Westchester, the sort of lower Hudson Valley region, I guess we call it, not bad. Again, it's a little bit below the average, but still pretty strong. Again, keep in mind that a lot of these jobs in New York City are going to people who live in these counties, especially Westchester. Fairfield and Kingston going up sort of to the sort of upper areas. Oh, I should have had Dutchess and Putnam too. Dutchess and Putnam look a lot like Kingston. So you see there's some parts that are lagging a little bit in terms of job growth, but the story's not all bad, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. And then if you look at the specific counties, it's interesting. So this is the same kind of chart. The data aren't quite as current. They only go up to the middle of last year, but it still gives you an idea of the trends. Orange and Rockland, you can see on the other side of the river, have been the strongest. Yet Westchester's done pretty well, and then Dutchess and Putnam is not a huge employment center, but all these counties have done reasonably okay in the last few years. Now, looking at sort of, oh, can I go back? Yeah, so to get an overview of all this, again, what we've done is looked at sort of longer-term trends, not so long-term, but basically from 2013, which is kind of when the jobs expansion really got going, to 2018, the annualized rate of growth of employment. So you can see throughout the region and in the U.S., New York City, again, has been leading the region in job growth, but throughout the region, even though things are doing okay, job growth has slowed. So in the Hudson Valley, which is kind of all those counties I showed you added up, job growth has slowed from about 1% to about 0.5%. New York City, it's slowed. So it's basically slowed throughout Fairfield County, and that's been going on nationally, and in northern New Jersey as well. So this is a little bit disconcerting because, you know, things are still growing, but really the only area in the last year that's had significant job creation has been New York City. And then, you know, I'm just going to break away because everything's based on employment. We're talking about employment. But another indication, another measure of how local economies are doing is home prices. So I like to look at home prices. Plus, everyone's interested in home prices. I don't know why. But, you know, what we've seen is that the recession, it's a long time ago, it's like 11 years ago, was led by a housing bust. That was the crux of what caused the recession. It wasn't nearly as bad in this region, but nevertheless, it was a bad period for the housing market. So in the last 5 years, looking around the region, you can see that New York City has seen some pretty good growth in home prices. Now keep in mind, this is the percent change, annualized percent change in home prices. This is not the level. You know, you see Manhattan down there looks kind of low. It doesn't mean Manhattan's inexpensive, as I'm sure you all know. And in fact, I'll just make a short aside. We talk to a lot of people to keep monitoring the economy, both, you know, quantitatively and qualitatively. And I love talking to real estate people in Manhattan because they talk about, well, the lower end of the market and the middle end of the market, and the middle end of the market is like 1 million to 3 million. And when you tell this to people in other parts of the country or even other parts of the region, they're like, wait, what does that mean? Anyway, what's interesting is that over the past 5 years, and especially over the past year, what's happened in New York City is you've had this dramatic slowdown throughout the city, and especially in the high-priced areas. When I say high-priced, relative to the other areas, Manhattan, Queens, and Kings, which is Brooklyn, you've seen this dramatic slowdown. Now, you've seen a slowdown nationally, too, in home prices, but it's not been as dramatic. Then you get into the nearby counties, Fairfield and Bergen. You've seen, again, a sort of a leveling off of home prices. However, Orange, Putnam, Dutchess, it's interesting because initially New York City, you know, if you look at the sort of bars in the back, New York City was leading the charge in home prices. Now other areas are sort of catching up. So you have Orange, Putnam, and Dutchess, and then Westchester and Rockland are sort of growing modestly. So I think this is useful to look at because, you know, one of the things that presaged the recession was the downturn in home prices, and the rise in home prices has, you know, when people are doing well in terms of home prices, they're going to be buying more, they're going to be more confident, and so forth. Which is not to say that housing affordability is not an issue. So, but anyway, I'm not going to get into that too much. But anyway, as a barometer of sort of the forward-looking, a barometer of sort of how the economy is doing. This is one useful indicator to look at. Okay, now switching back to employment, this is what we call a bubble chart. And I'm not going to go through it, but I will explain it because it has nothing to do with bubbles like financial bubbles. It's just bubbles because the data points look like bubbles. And the size of these bubbles represent the size of the industry. This is in New York City. So I try not to be too New York City focused, but when you get into sort of looking at what drives the local economy, you can't really not look at New York City. And so what we have is on the horizontal axis, we have average annual earnings. And on the vertical axis, we have growth from 2010 to 2018. And so basically, you look at finance and insurance, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is by far the highest paying industry, and it's a big industry. You can see by the size of the bubble in New York City, but it hasn't really grown very much. But then you get into some of these other smaller sectors that don't have quite as many jobs, but they've grown like very rapidly. Information services, and keep in mind, even some of these bubbles that like don't look that high, you're talking about 50% or so over the past decade or less. So things like computer, electronics, professional and technical services, and then some of the lower paying industries like restaurants. I know it's hard to read those, but anyway. You can, by the way, you can, if anyone wants to, we'll make these charts available so you don't have to worry about memorizing everything or snapping it. And then, so basically, this is a sort of a portrait of how the industries are doing in New York City. And I'm going to note the financial industry, and in particular securities industry, has been historically extremely important to New York City. So the blue line here is trends in securities industry employment, and the gray areas are periods where, when I say securities, what I mean is basically Wall Street, you know, the big, you know, investment banks and so forth. The gray periods are periods of declines in not Wall Street, not in terms of the stock market, but in terms of employment. And you can see there are big booms and busts, and the booms tend to be bigger than the busts, until recently at least. And you can also see that the other curve, which is the sort of the light brown curve, is basically employment outside the securities industry. So you have the securities industry, you have Wall Street, and then you have everything else in New York City. And they're indexed differently, obviously, because the non-Wall Street is much bigger. But what you notice is that whenever there's a turning point in securities, it usually is followed by a turning point in everything else, in the whole economy. And what this suggests, and I strongly suggest, I would say, is that Wall Street historically has been a driver of the cycles in New York City's economy. So when securities turns down, pretty soon you know that, that the rest of the economy is going to turn down. And when Wall Street starts picking up, even in the 70s when things were pretty grim, you can see Wall Street starts picking up and then the rest of the economy. And it happens time and time over again that these booms and busts are led by Wall Street, both in terms of timing and magnitude. But look at the last recession. The last recession, you had a pretty big drop in securities employment. And since then, what you've had is very little growth in Wall Street employment, but you've had a record, I don't want to say record because, I mean, this goes back pretty far, but it's the strongest boom New York City's had in many, many decades. And it's done so without the securities industry. And if you were to sort of at the beginning of this economic expansion, if you were going to tell me, well, the securities industry is going to drop and then it's really not going to come back much, I would be I would say, well, New York City's economy, and people were actually saying this, New York City's economy can't really do well without the securities industry. Well, it would have been wrong. It goes back to the things about economists, how well they can count, and so forth. So the lesson is often what looks like it's bound to be true, or like something, it's obvious like something's going to be terrible or something's going to be great. Remember back in 2006, people were saying, oh, home prices never decline. And so whenever this is why I don't like to make predictions, because I'd rather just sort of try to give you an idea of what's been happening and where the risks and so forth are. Anyway, you have this very big boom in New York City's economy without Wall Street. So where's it coming from? So this is rescaled a little bit. It's the same chart, it's just the scale's a little bit compressed. This is the securities industry. Since 2010, it's added about less than 20,000 jobs, which is pretty small. Tech. What we call tech, and we have to define this because it's very frustrating. If you want to look at information technology, I think our commercial real estate people call it, there's an acronym TAMI, Technology, Advertising, Media, Information, whatever you want to call it. The way we define it is these industries that run like computer manufacturing, electronic shopping, things like, Etsy, Google, all the big ones, Facebook, whatever. This is where you've seen a lot of the job growth. And the reason I'm picking out this sector, it's not like most of the job growth in New York City has been in this sector. You've also had growth in low-paying industries, restaurants, hotels, retail, all sorts of things that account for sort of a big bulk of job creation. But this is an interesting sector because although it's not quite as high-paying as securities, it's, if I were to go back to the bubble chart and show you which bubbles we include in there, they're doing pretty well both in terms of growth and in terms of average income. So these are good paying jobs. They're growing in New York City. It's almost caught up to Wall Street. Some people see that chart and they say, oh, well, we're the new Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley, in terms of like share of the economy, we're not even close yet. But what that means is that there's a lot of potential for growth. So I guess the way I would put it is tech employment. It's not yet what I'd call like a huge key sector in New York, but it's definitely a rapidly growing sector that's driving the economy. I'm just going to take a look quickly at manufacturing job growth. I like showing maps because it gives you a sort of a view of the landscape, but this just looks at New York and Connecticut. But you can see manufacturing growth over the past 5 years has been the sort of the dark reddish and the brown are declining, areas where manufacturing employment is declining. You can see throughout New York City and the New York City region, it's been declining. That doesn't mean there aren't like sectors and segments of manufacturing that are doing well. But the big industries, things like apparel in New York City, these are things that have been losing jobs for years. But when you get up into the Hudson Valley, there are certainly some counties that are doing well. You get up near Albany, you see that strength. In the last year, it's slowed in some areas, but you can still see that a lot of the area is, especially for some reason on the west side of the Hudson, and still up in the Albany area, you're still seeing some job growth in manufacturing. Now, one of our survey of we do a survey of manufacturers and service companies, and every so often we ask a question: have you had difficulty hiring workers in the last 3 months? So we ask this every November, and what you see is that it's been exceptionally high. Because of a lack of qualified candidates. And you see it's been exceptionally high among manufacturers. It hasn't been quite as high among service firms, but it's been growing pretty rapidly. And then we have a chart on the change in wages that are paid. And this we asked in December. And basically we say, last year, how much did your average wages increase for your workforce? Now you'd think with an unemployment rate this low and with everyone having trouble finding workers, you'd see acceleration in wages, but we haven't really seen that much of it. I mean, you can see it's a little higher than it's been in recent years, but so for example, for this year and last year, it was about 4% on average. Which is, a little bit above the inflation rate, but it's not what you would normally see in a period where there's, in at least many areas, what we think of as labor shortages. And then even in the manufacturing sector, we see it actually has come down a little bit, even though people are complaining of workers. I'd love to hear if anyone has thoughts when I'm done. I'm going to finish off with one last thing because I think it's interesting and useful to know. A few months ago, we did some analysis of the New York-Pennsylvania border, and I'm just showing it to you there. I know it's not part of kind of this region, but the reason we use that is that New York State's been raising the minimum wage steadily over the last few years, and you have a situation where these counties on the New York side of the border have a minimum wage that's gone up to about $11, and on the Pennsylvania side, it's just the national minimum wage, which I think is $7.25. And what we've done is we took two low-wage industries, retail trade and leisure and hospitality, and we compared them. So basically, I'm not going to get into reading all this in the interest of time, but basically, so since the fourth quarter of 2009, workers and the New York have been subject to the federal minimum wage of $7.25, but New York, of course, has raised it well above that. So what we did was we looked at a couple industries, leisure and hospitality, and we looked at two measures. This is a pretty simple, intuitive exercise. So although we did a lot of regressions and we tried to see if anything was significant was going on, but on the left, well, let me start out actually on the right. We looked at average hourly earnings, average weekly earnings, sorry, in the leisure and hospitality industry, and so it trends up over time, and then once the minimum wages started to kick in, as you might expect, the red line, which is Pennsylvania, kind of continued to rise at the same rate, and New York State's minimum wage in the New York State counties altogether rose at a much faster rate since then, year after year. This is what you would expect in a low-wage industry when you're raising the minimum wage. What's more interesting is that employment continued to grow at the same rate on the Pennsylvania side, but there doesn't seem to have been a negative effect because economists, economic theory would suggest that there might be a negative effect when you start restricting wages. Companies might move, they might be able to hire less people. It actually grew faster in New York State, but that was because casinos opened, a couple of casinos opened on the New York side. But basically, we've seen no negative effect. And then we also looked at retail, which has been a weak industry anyway, so you might think that the dynamics would be different. And it has declined because the shift from retail to sort of online, which doesn't have to be sort of in your county. But you can see the trends in New York and Pennsylvania have been pretty much almost indistinguishable, but average weekly earnings has risen more. Now, we put this out. It got a lot of interest because there are people. We're trying to monitor what's going on. This doesn't mean the minimum wage isn't having some adverse effects in some areas. It doesn't mean it won't. But what it suggests is that as of at least 2018, that the ratcheting up of the minimum wage had not had any negative effect on employment. So you can ask me questions about this if you want. So I'm just going to recap, and I'm not even going to recap. I'm just going to put this up there. But basically, unemployment's near record lows. New York City remains the engine of job growth. There are many signs that the economy is slowing: housing markets, job growth, business surveys. But despite these tight job markets, wage growth remains pretty subdued. So thanks. I'm happy to take questions. Sorry. Don't everyone jump at once. When I say questions, if you have comments, if you have things that you'd like, observations or things that you think are interesting going on, yeah?
Hi, thank you. Excuse me, I have a question about the minimum wage data. I know with the governor's proposed budget coming, this, $6 billion in Medicaid or $4 billion in Medicaid shortfall. Some of that is being attributed to the minimum wage requirements by a lot of Medicaid healthcare providers, some of the long-term care facilities. So I was curious how that, how you can sort of align that with your comment.
Okay, that's a great question. And so it's a great question, but it's one I can't really answer because we only look at those two industries. Now we could have and maybe should have and will look at healthcare so we're following up because there was a lot of interest in that, and because we now have more time has gone by, we have more data. We're now actually taking a look at a bunch of sectors, including healthcare. So hopefully in a little while we'll be able to answer that, but it's too early to tell. Another industry that we're interested in looking at is manufacturing, and the reason is that even though manufacturing is a higher paying industry than things like restaurants, the idea is that if you raise the minimum wage, restaurants have to pay a higher minimum wage. They're competing with the restaurant down the block, and they also have to pay a higher minimum wage, whereas manufacturers may be competing with another company in Alabama or Singapore or whatever, and so they might be more sensitive to minimum wages. So that's something that we're definitely going to look at, but I don't really have a good answer for that, sorry. Back there? Sorry.
Hi.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Good morning.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
One question, two parts. Big macro factors, the China trade deal and the record stock market.
How do those play into your general comment that the economy is slowing?
The rising stock market and the China trade deal, is that what you're saying? I mean, okay, so there's actually one survey that we did a few months ago, but in the interest of time, I didn't really include it. But we asked what effect trade and tariffs are having on business. And a number, I don't remember the exact percentages, but a sizable proportion of manufacturers and even a pretty high proportion of service firms did say it was having a negative effect on a number of aspects of their business, but basically their bottom line. Now, of course, things change month to month, even week to week, even day to day, so it's hard to know if those negatives are becoming less negatives or becoming positives. And then you have a small handful of businesses that say that they're being helped by the tariffs, because obviously some businesses who are more competing with China or whatever may have a positive effect from that. So in terms, I don't know what effect the trade deal is going to have. I don't even know what's going on with trade exactly, because again, it changes so often. But one of the it seems to have been a concern to businesses in recent months. The second thing you mentioned, which is the stock market is a leading economic indicator nationally, and it is definitely something that that one has to look at. And so if you're just looking at the stock market, that's a plus for, it would make one a little more optimistic about the economy going forward. But the fact is there are a bunch of leading indicators, and some of them are, giving positive signals, and some of them are not. What I'm talking about is just what's already happened. So there has been a slowing in job growth. And again, given that, one of the reasons that the economy may be slowing is the regional economy, what I'm talking about. One of the reasons the regional economy may be slowing is because it's harder and harder to find workers. So you could have companies that, are confident, they want to expand, but things are going a little slower because they can't find enough workers. So, you have both what we call supply and demand factors driving the economy. So when I say the economy is slowing, it could be that it's coming up against certain constraints, and it could be that, it may pick up again in the months ahead. Anyway.
It's going to be the last question.
Okay.
Hey, thank you for your time. My name's Ashley Bendell. I'm representing the Westchester HR Management Association. I'm on the board. I'm also the district manager for ADP. So I have my fingertips on a lot of compensation and people movement data. My question to you is around the movement of labour. Westchester is a great place to live, has a phenomenal talent base, but people have the opportunity to work in New York for potentially higher pay, New Jersey, or even Connecticut. I'm interested in your perspective on how Westchester holds on to its talent pool and enables companies to come in and attract them, as opposed to moving elsewhere and outside of the county. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. I think one of the biggest constraints faced by New York City and by Westchester is housing affordability. So, attracting talent is important, but a lot of the places that are actually the most attractive places to live, thinking of Westchester, maybe New York City, San Francisco area, people love it, there's good job growth, but you then run into the issue of housing affordability. So I think that's a big issue, and I don't really necessarily have a solution. I know that one of the things that's a concern, especially in some extent in New York, but more in a place like San Francisco, is restrictions on building. So that's one way to hold on to talent. The other way is to make the best of the existing talent, right? Because one of the issues that that comes across a lot is it's not that companies say there are no people, it's that companies are saying we don't have enough qualified people, enough people with whatever skills, even sometimes just soft skills. So anything that can enhance that, and one of the areas that the Fed has been working and doing research on is the relationships between local colleges and community colleges and the business community. So all these things I think are important. So housing affordability, education, and a linkage between how you're educating and training people. So thanks. I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason, for those great insights to the region's job outlook and economic indicators. We really appreciate you being here with us today. Now it's my pleasure to invite Melinda Mack and our three panelists up to the stage. Melinda Mack is the Executive Director of the New York State Association of Training and Employment Professionals, a nationally recognized nonprofit organization in workforce development. Melinda is a strong advocate and expert in systems change and co-leader of the Invest in Skills New York initiative and campaign that successfully engaged the state in 2018 to invest more than $175 million in job training and workforce development. She and NIATAP also partner with New York State Economic Development Council to share promising practices and create more opportunities to link economic and workforce development. Please welcome Melinda Mack while she and the other speakers get ready for our great panel discussion.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I, of course, have to add a couple of thank yous as well. Again, hearing the county executives speak, I meet a lot of politicians, right? And very few as eloquently describe some of the issues we're facing and the importance of workforce development. So I'd like to extend our thanks there. Also to Jason and WCA for having this panel, and of course to Anita Lowy and her team. We have had a steadfast advocate in DC around funding workforce development. And it's important to sort of notice and reflect that without the resources from the federal government, a lot of what exists in the workforce system would be unavailable. And then, of course, our partners at the Westchester Putnam Workforce Board, who again are the sort of the leaders in being able to develop and support the workforce ecosystem. So as Jason shared, I run the state's Workforce Development Association. And so we are the Chamber of Commerce of Education, Job Training, and Employment Services across New York State. We were really deeply engaged in helping support the governor's office and the state think differently about workforce development and the need to increase investment. Prior to 2 years ago, our state invested almost $0 in job training programs outside of the traditional pipelines like SUNY and CUNY. And so I share that with you because as you sort of think about the resources that are on the ground and the way that we need to work together, although we have more money, it is still relatively scarce, which makes these kinds of conversations even more important. Because at the end of the day, we have a problem we need to solve collectively, and if we can't put our heads together to do it, we're all going to be in trouble. The last thing I wanted to also share is workforce development is not a new idea. This may be the first ever summit on workforce around the partners around the table here, but workforce development has been around since the Middle Ages, right? How you educate, train, employ, make sure you're shifting to meet the needs of the labor market are problems that we have faced for millennia. And so I share that because there are a lot of great and existing good ideas that need to be scaled and expanded, and you'll hear some of those today. But also, more importantly, you don't have to recreate the wheel. You just have to think differently about how you engage and invest. So with that, I'm so pleased and honored to be up here with Dr. Belinda Miles, the president of Westchester Community College, which serves around 26,000 students in one of the nation's largest metropolitan areas, with Joe Carbone, who is the president and CEO of The Workplace out of Bridgeport, Connecticut, a nationally recognized nonprofit and local workforce board, and Diane Woolley, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at White Plains Hospital, who's responsible for employee relations, labor relations, recruitment, you sort of name it. You have a very long list of to-dos. So again, I thank the panelists for joining us today. And as you likely know, these three speakers were very deeply engaged in the Jobs Waiting program and really ultimately the success of that initiative. So our job today is to talk a bit about the workforce ecosystem, but also to give these folks an opportunity to share what we know are nationally recognized best practices. So we should start around, go to Diane first. Really, what is the employer role in recruitment and thinking about some of the challenges you're currently facing around recruitment?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. So some of our current challenges, just as Jason mentioned earlier, where our competition for talent is New York City. So we're in Westchester County. We are an organization that is growing in leaps and bounds, currently the largest private employer in White Plains. When I started about 4.5 years ago, we had about 2,000 employees, and right now we're sitting at 4,000 employees. So that's incredible growth over a short period of time. With the labor market being as tight as it is, we've had to become very strategic and creative and really think out of the box as to how we can not only attract the talent, but retain the talent. It's one piece to get them to come to work for us. How do we get them to stay working for us? So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our strategies today, and very proud to announce that, we just ended 2019 with a 10% turnover rate, which, although we're not happy that we hit double digits, we are thrilled that we are well below the national average in healthcare, which is currently 14 to 17%, and even higher in nursing.
That's great. And when you think about the recruitment challenges, what are some of the issues that you're facing as you go out and look for the skilled workforce you need to operate?
So we're noticing in healthcare that we have some critical shortages in certain areas. So what we've had to do is, after countless efforts of recruiting that we weren't getting qualified candidates, we had to develop some programs where we actually are using our own talent base as our pipeline. In that, we have this program called Earn While You Learn. So I'll take an example of an OR scrub tech, which is a very hard job to fill. We were just spinning our wheels recruiting. Finally, we just said, why don't we look at some of our internal talent, see if we can get them interested in the training, and what are the barriers to them doing that so that they would move on to these jobs. Some of the barriers were they didn't have the resources to go to school, they didn't have the time to go to school. So what Earn While You Learn is actually a program that takes that full-time worker. We partner with a school, and what we do is look at the school program, pay the employee to go to school, so their complement of hours, so let's take, for example, if it's a 40-hour employee and there's a 15-hour requirement to be in school, they work the other 25 hours in their existing job. Once we get them through the program, then they are committed to staying with us for a period of time in that new role. What this has done is it's allowed some advancement, it's allowed some people to go back to school that otherwise couldn't go back to school, and then it's opened up the doors for some of those entry-level jobs, which is where we were able to work with the Jobs Waiting program and hire some talent to move into those jobs. That program is so successful that we've actually just started the second round for OR scrub techs this month, and we're moving on to respiratory therapists as well.
That's great. And for the workforce wonks out here, that's called incumbent worker training, right? And so it's an opportunity to actually think about the current workforce differently and as an asset in terms of how you fill and allow that opening for backfills, as Diane mentioned. I think one of the things I'd love to hear from Joe, because Joe has a lot of really interesting and innovative ways to maximize underutilized labor, another way of saying there's a lot of people who probably could use a good or better job. What are some of the strategies you've used around recruitment in this tight labor market?
Okay, well, thank you, Melinda. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say a word about the County Association. I'm from Connecticut, so most of you probably think, well, he doesn't know anybody in the audience. Well, over the years, Bill Mooney and his team have been bringing people to Connecticut to meet with me in the workplace, and I think I know everybody in this room. Every single person has been to the workplace. Well, thank you. I had to throw that in. Hi, Bill. There's all sorts of things that we're doing to try to help industries, folks that are having difficulty with both recruitment and with retention, of looking at alternate populations. One of the ones that I think it's important not to overlook is older workers. I think with all the busyness with respect to, you post a job in the morning and by the time you get to midday, you've got 300 applicants and they're coming in through search engines all over the country. You can get caught up in that maze and you can begin to stereotype. So we're finding, and I think it's a national trend, that older workers, and older workers are maybe 50 years of age or older. I mean, there's nobody in this room in that category, obviously, but I mean, it's considered older, but it's not old by any means, and yet they're overlooked. And I'm not going to question all the HR folks here, but I think there is clear evidence of a tendency to look for younger workers for obvious reasons. You know, they think they're more tech savvy because they carry around these devices since they were 4 years old, and a whole bunch of other factors. So, I mean, I think you got to look at that. I think you got to include in the perspective of your HR, recruitment operations, people with disabilities, a reentry population, long-term unemployed, a lot of other groups that may not initially receive the attention that they should. I think that's one of the things that we're going to be seeing more and more of, because we didn't hear from Jason that somehow unemployment's going to rise right away. So I think the tightening of the workforce is going to continue, and in many respects, kind of a free market response is going to be to begin to kind of relax maybe some of the restrictions that there were in the past, and really to look at new groups of people.
I think that's really important. As was shared, I think some of the numbers that when they come out and look at the labor market data, the unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities hovers around 60%. And so when we think about maximizing underutilized employment, there really is pools and pockets of talent that we haven't tapped into yet. I'd like to turn to Dr. Miles for a moment and sort of just add a couple of quick statistics, I think, to sort of flavor the conversation. In many ways, you're tasked with educating and training the workforce of our future, but you also have some real challenges. Around 37% of the folks in the Hudson Valley have a high school diploma or less. 37% have a high school diploma or less. And so although we sort of see the highly educated population, particularly in this room, a lot of the people who live in our communities aren't quite ready for college or ready for post-secondary. But also about 30% are ALICE, which mean they're asset-limited, income-constrained employed. So to speak to what Diane shared, many people are already working in 1 or 2 low-wage jobs, which make it actually very difficult to be able to increase your skills and abilities to access some of these good or middle-skill jobs. So I wanted to turn to Dr. Miles to talk a bit about what you're doing at Westchester Community College, and in particular, how you're servicing this group or population.
Thank you, Melinda, and good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here and see so many friends in the audience. We are Westchester Community College. You mentioned 26,000 students. That's a very large population. About 12,000 of those students are in our traditional degree-seeking pathway. They are working toward achieving an associate degree. Many of them will go on to transfer to four-year institutions. Many are seeking employment immediately after having an applied learning associate degree, and they're going into a middle skills career pathway. So they're looking for that first job in a field that is in high demand, that has high potential for a career ladder, for progression within a job career path. They will need additional education as they move forward, and we get them started. About 65% of our students are in career and technical education programs that lead to those kinds of middle skills opportunities. So that's a large percentage of our population that is already thinking about their jobs and their careers when they get started. We seek to get them ready by embedding many of the job preparation skills into the curriculum, and that's been a resurgence of focus for us to work with our faculty to help those students to get organized. But your question about those who are underprepared, the community colleges traditionally are the open door institution within the higher education landscape. And by open door, I mean that we provide a broad range of access to very high-performing students in our honors college and in our high-demand fields that are very competitive, as well as those who might need a little extra help. And we can provide them with that pathway and say, you're welcome here. We have programs to get you started. One such initiative is our Economic Opportunity Center in Yonkers, which works with individuals who meet poverty thresholds, who can come in and qualify for training and be able to experience economic mobility from the lowest level to a starting point in a career. And then those incumbent workers have great potential to move on and advance their careers beyond that state. But I mentioned those that transfer into four-year colleges. Those are also career students. They are pre-law, they're pre-med, they are future teachers and social workers. And so we have really changed the conversation to look not only at education for education's sake, which is a beautiful thing. I'm a liberal arts major, and liberal arts majors are doing pretty well in their careers. How many of you have liberal arts degrees? Okay, lots of the leaders are coming forward, but students are certainly thinking about the return on investment for their educational dollar that they're spending, and families are as well. And so we've added that career focus to the curriculum, and we are partnering with so many businesses and employers to structure that and build that within our environment.
So I'm going off script. Maybe good, maybe bad. But I wanted to sort of ask a question around youth workforce development, because as you sort of shared, this concept of how you make a curriculum focused on career as well as to college readiness, I think is really important. But I'd be interested from the perspective of a panel about ways that we can more deeply engage young adults, sort of age 16 to 30, around career readiness, access to employment opportunities that they may not traditionally see as a pathway. What are some best practices that you see in the field or ways that you are looking to engage young adults?
So I think some of the work that we've done, and we've partnered with Westchester, with some other organizations, when you take that younger generation, AKA the millennials, it's really trying to work with them to understand what does going to work mean. And we found that to be one of our most significant challenges in this day and age. You know, they go to school, they want to come into the workforce. Really, those soft skills of dealing with people, those skills of just, you know, what it means to now be grown up and go to work, it's a lot of work that we need, and I see a lot of heads shaking yes. So I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about. So it's a challenge when we find the talent, we recruit the talent in. You have somebody just out of school, and they're asking when they're going to be, you know, the next CEO, or when they're going to get their promotion, and they haven't even started day one of their first job. So those are some of the challenges that we've had to overcome in working and grooming them just to get the skills. But then the other side of skills from the education standpoint is the work experience and that ability to go to work and stay at work. And I see some of my friends shaking their heads yes. So.
I think we've learned that we have to be realistic about where students are and what they know and what they don't know. A couple of months ago, we went kind of old school, and we had the opportunity to provide a bus tour, which engaged some of the high school counselors in going out to industry so that they could better understand some of the industry sectors and clusters, because they didn't understand what we mean by advanced manufacturing or some of the high-tech careers within the health career organization. I'm looking at Con Ed here and very grateful for the opportunity that we had to work with Laura and Jane and others, our own Lori Miller-McNeil from the college, on coordinating these individuals who had an opportunity to go out and see what it's like. Con Ed was one of the stops along the way. And the comprehensive materials that the organizations provided that showed here's what kinds of credentials you need, here's what the pathway is, here's where you can start, and here's where you can go after a couple of years. Folks don't know that. We serve so many first-generation students at the college that they're not having these conversations around the dinner table, and they may not be exposed to people who have careers, or that's not what they're talking about when they gather at Thanksgiving. You know, hey, Uncle Joe, how did you do in that career? What is it that you're doing to earn a living? And you can be that close and not really know what's going on. So that kind of exposure is key. And having the instructional support in the classroom include problem-based learning, real-world problems that are taking place that make the theory applicable to something that is relevant to the student, is something that engages them and also prepares them and gives them a more realistic idea about what lies ahead.
Great.
I think that point kind of identifies what the role of government really needs to be here. I think you said 37% high school diploma or less. That is very high, and that would be a noble endeavor, I think, for any branch of government to undertake to significantly reduce that number over some given period of time. I mean, you can't be more kind of naked out there in the workforce if you don't even have a high school diploma, and frankly, it's growing so that even if that's all you have, it's not sufficient. So as you try to prepare our workforce for the future, and we can get into a lot of different details as what different groups can do when it kind of comes back to government, that is a sector of our population that huge investment has to be made. Not only to the point in which they've got to get the high school diploma if they don't have it, but some connection between higher education and that point needs to be established. More and more internships, which work very well. I mean, there's a lot of kids. I mean, I call them kids, but look, they're up to 24. You're still considered youth at USDOL if you're up to 24. And they don't know what they want to do. And I don't know why. I knew when I was 14 what I wanted to do, but they don't. And in many respects, the internship does give them that kind of exposure to different industries. And it also can provide an incentive for them of what to work for. So I think engaging with business to have more internships of that nature. But I think for the state, for the county, in my case, for the state of Connecticut, which I have been kind of bearing with this for a long time, where we've got over 350,000 adults in Connecticut that don't have a high school diploma, just high school, all right? There has never been a major investment, either through adult ed or any other program, to target a specific number of them and significantly to reduce that number. That's a start. And as the economy continues to prosper and the skill shortage, the critical thinking shortage expands, I think we're going to move less with government doing it for us and more with businesses or employers doing it for themselves. So therefore, what can government do? Government can focus on these folks who have multiple barriers to career and to opportunity. That's where government needs to focus.
Well, and I'll also sort of add, it's also where business needs to advocate, right? And so when it comes down to really thinking about how you have a sustainable pipeline for workers, it's the thoughtfulness around what is the pool of workers that you need to be able to access over the long term. Mm-hmm. And so I sort of share, the more that you can understand and get the data, you know, Jason is one of my favorite economists, and I'm not just saying that because I've known him since the last recession, but he's a wonderful guy. But the more you understand the information in detail around that longer term pipeline for hiring, the more you can sort of support the system of providers like BOCES, like the school districts, the community colleges, around what the resources are necessary to fulfill the needs that you have. So I want to sort of move back to the retention issue. So we talked about it briefly around housing as one of the biggest challenges. We also know that childcare and transportation tend to be one of the largest issues around employee retention. What are some strategies that you're employing either through the hospital or, Joe, in your partnership with employers to increase employee retention?
So we have quite a few strategies that we're working on, but a lot of it is once we get people in, how can we maintain that great place to work or that employer of choice status? Our competition is New York City. It's not Westchester County, it is New York City. We're very close to the train station. People can easily live in Westchester County, go into the city to work. How can we get them to stay and take our jobs here in White Plains? Better yet, how can we get people to live in the city to come into White Plains to take our positions? So we've become very creative around compensation and benefits to make sure that we look like, feel like a city hospital. In addition, we've created some additional programs around development. So one in particular, and where are my friends from Long Island? I see it right here. So Long Island University, we've partnered closely with them. This is our third year now that we have an on-site MBA program right at White Plains Hospital. So that has been a tremendous opportunity for, at this point, 60 of our employees to get that higher education, that degree. We're very happy this year to also share some of those seats with our friends at Burke, and so that we do have a full complement of people from Westchester County attending the program. It's a 2.5-year program. Once they graduate, they're committed to stay with us for a period of time, so they can get that degree right on site, and then they have to give us some time afterwards. So that has been a great retention tool as well.
That's great. Joe, what have you been seeing in the field?
I think that to the extent that the employer is offering opportunities to their employees to upgrade their skills, to be further educated or further trained or do something that they view as an upgrade, a way to protect themselves if there's any future reductions in force, but just to feel as if they're more marketable. One of the little things that I think a lot of the younger folks want is they want to be respected. They want to feel like they're part of the team, they're part of the company, they're respected for what they can do. A little thing, it doesn't cost very much to do that, but they have to feel like that's part of it. But I think one of the most important things that we do, and it's what I preach to business leaders all the time wherever I go in the country, is to invest in your workers. You've got a deal. This is going to be a sustained period of skill shortage. And in order for you to prosper during that period, you've got to have the most really productive workforce that's possible. You've got to bring your incumbent workers to their full potential. And the way to do that is to invest in them. And it kind of gives me another chance here with this question to make the point. It may be time to stop relying upon government to do it all for you. I'm going to sound like a Republican when I'm not, but it's true. Maybe government, because of its restrictions, can't move as quickly as your change is moving. And I think the county executive touched on that briefly. And he's preaching the choir here because this is where I think we're going. The way that your companies, and be it for-profit, not-for-profit, whatever they may be, you're thinking about your research, R&D type of investment every year. You need to think in terms of talent. How do you preserve the talent you need? How do you create it? How do you attract it? But above all, don't overlook what you already have. If they're already your employees, they're part of your incumbent worker base, bring them to their full potential. Let productivity help you move beyond this period of skill shortage. And I think the population growth is not a lot better than it is in our state of Connecticut, Lower Fairfield County, where we have fewer people today than we had 10 years ago. So with all those trend lines going, I think take great care of what you already got. And you already have them. It's incumbent workers. And to the extent that you can maximize the productivity that they bring to your product or to your service, you are clearly protecting your base and your competitive edge.
I mentioned a few moments ago that about half of our students are involved in traditional degree programs. The other half are in workforce development and community education programs. They are focused on upskilling. Our VP for Workforce is here, Terry Wiesel, and some of her team members. And the programming that they're engaged in are ones that help businesses make that investment in their employee. One example is an initiative that we have with Westchester Medical Center, where we are providing training on site, offering medical coding to a cohort of incumbent workers who have been identified to benefit from that need that the hospital has articulated, and we are partnering with them. And it has a diverse group of individuals, some who are just getting initial training in that field, others who are nurse managers who are learning that skill as an adjunct to their core skill set. And so looking at that employee who does a good job, they're coming in on time, they've been faithful, that's a good one to invest in. And it's hard to think about succession planning. I've had to deal with it as a new CEO of my organization 5 years ago. Where are we going to get that talent as they continue to evolve or retire or take new opportunities? And so being creative about who's there. One of the first things I did, my first month of work, was to create a senior executive leadership team or administrative leadership team, the SALT group. I got them all in a room together they had to endure my graduate seminar style of leadership, but I got to find out where the talent was, who was thinking a certain way, and almost immediately I was able to flip several of those individuals into interim roles, which was a growth opportunity. Others, I was able to see what kind of experiences that they needed to advance so that they can move into other opportunities. And I'm always trolling for talent. So if I meet some of your people and decide that we're interested in recruiting them, we are part of that ecosystem. And it's a beautiful thing because there's great talent within the county, and we have to think broadly. Another thing I had to do is we had vacancies, and we had a lot that took place. I think we've hired about 75 to 80 new full-time employees, replacements. We was revamping job descriptions and being more creative about what we needed in terms of credentials. Did we really need a master's degree in this, or where could we focus on the associate degree and value our own type of credential for some of the employees, and look at this middle skills track and pathway, and I think that that's helpful. Lots of the jobs that we see, Jelaine Williams is here from our Career Center. You'll want to reach out to her to be involved in our job fair this spring, but we find that it's bachelor's degree, well, bachelor's degree in what? And why? Again, looking at this, understanding this middle skills marketplace that needs more than the high school diploma, but not yet the bachelor's degree, maybe the bachelor's degree eventually, maybe a workforce certification in IT or some other industry recognized certificate along that pathway, and being very creative about how eclectic the credential field is and the way careers are developed.
So I just heard a couple things in there to summarize. So I heard Dr. Miles talked about credential creep, which is when you're asking for a higher level of skill than is necessary to do the job. When I worked in New York City, we did a really large recruitment for Whole Foods, and they were asking for associate's degrees for cashiers, right? And so it's, again, really thinking about those job descriptions. I heard Joe talk a little bit about how you invest as a company in your longer-term outlook around workforce development and skill upgrading. And then I heard from Diane this concept of being creative and how you actually think differently about some of those investments, as well as the internal pipeline. Two sort of other things I wanted to mention is there's a nationally recognized program called the Employer Resource Network, or the EARN. It started actually in Ohio and Michigan and is now sort of spreading across upstate New York, where it's a service that employers pay into for a network of community-based organizations to support low-wage workers with childcare, housing, legal support, any other sort of benefit that they may need that helps them stay employed. The other, which is really interesting, is we talked to upstate manufacturers, including companies like Optimax. They're thinking more creatively about how they think about time and leave for their employees. So Optimax might be going to unlimited leave as a benefit. Another is thinking about shifting start times. Childcare is one of your primary challenges, and you're asking everyone to be there at 9 a.m. How do you shift the start time so that people can get their kids to school, right? So just basic things that I think people are investing in. So we've got a few more minutes for the panel, and we're going to open it up for discussion in a moment, so think of your questions. But I do want to close out with this group and thinking about this big opportunity we have, right? We have a $1 billion problem, but we have $175 million from the state. What can we do to be creative? What are some of the biggest ideas that you have around investing and shifting this focus to fill these open positions, or the impact that workforce can have on the region? And I'll sort of open it up to your big ideas.
I really think it has to be more partnerships between the employers, the educators, where we can express and put our needs out there and work with the higher education to meet those needs and develop programs similar to if you're doing the coding at Westchester, we're doing some of the other programs. How can we partner and get those skills trained and use that internal pipeline?
Yeah, I would say that from the standpoint of the state and the region, to focus on the mid-sized companies, because I think larger employers get it, and they're going to move in that direction, they're going to do the right things, but most of the jobs, certainly in the job growth, is in mid-sized companies. To get into the business of actively promoting incentives for them to begin the process of investment in incumbent workers. I've kind of gone on, repeatedly on that theme, but I think that's one of the most important things that you can do. Now, that's a foreign kind of a business to a lot of small businesses. I mean, they focus on their product and service. They're not expert at providing education, training, or upgrading, or looking at one of their employees and determining some, scientific way of reaching that person's productivity level, highest level, and bringing them to that level. One of the things that I think the college and other groups can do is to help them to find the ways to do that. All right? They may be very good at what they do, and obviously they are, but they're not necessarily experienced in this field. So helping these mid-sized businesses make this adjustment, make this transition, so that the development of their workforce, the creation of skills, the upskilling of their workforce, and measuring it in some way that you can determine what the productivity growth is realized from it, and also helping them with tax credits and other benefits that they will derive if they do it. It's probably one of the most important things that can be done. There's very little we can do to grow population. Westchester County, like certainly my county here in Connecticut, Fairfield County, is not cheap to do business. Our competitive edge is talent, is being smarter than everybody else. That's how we're going to continue to prosper. And one of the ways in which we do it, I think, is to become that force in the community that focuses on these mid-size, upper small-size business and show them how to do it and help them to do it. I think that's one of the most important types of responsibilities that education, workforce entities, and county government have.
Dr. Miles.
Yes, and I think it's time for us to really define what we mean by this term ecosystem of economic development and workforce development. We use the word pretty liberally, and we get it. We all are partners, we're all players, and we're probably we looking for ways to better integrate what we do. If I get a phone call from an industry leader, I may not be able to fill that void. Am I working closely with a counterpart at another institution, either with BOCES or with one of the four-year colleges or another provider? And are we connected in a way? So what are those tools? Is it the professional organizations? And we are delighted to have our workforce coordination through the county. How can we engage with that or a similar type of entity to help us to understand how to approach what these challenges are that we're facing, as well as some of the new opportunities. We're at this whole new fourth industrial revolution where jobs are shifting, and we are needing to prepare individuals for these emerging careers. We are looking at our curriculum to infuse it with artificial intelligence, even at the freshman and sophomore level of higher education, so those students are prepared for more advanced computer science degrees, and partnering with major universities on those types of initiatives. I would also suggest leveraging not only the things that we can change internally, but also leveraging some of the external dollars that we can draw down from New York State, $175 million in particular, getting our share of that for this region, but also looking at some of the federal dollars that are available. And the community college certainly can play a role, but we can't do it by ourselves. We need to have partners in industry clusters that can work with us. That's where we've seen our best success around National Science Foundation funding from NIH, other kinds of resources that help us to focus on those career paths and prepare individuals for those collectively.
Thank you. So we have about 30 minutes for questions, and I saw a lot of nodding heads and a lot of some of these like, So I'm sure that there's some out there. So we'll get started. I think there's microphones running. And if you don't mind just noting who you are and what organization you're with, I think that would be helpful. So I see a woman through the bright light at the table towards the back.
Light is bright.
I'll say, can't even see.
It's really bright up here.
That's bright.
Embrace it. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Jan Fisher. I'm the Executive Director of Nonprofit Westchester, and I want to thank the WCA for including us and making it possible for so many nonprofit organizations to come. I did notice in the conversations, which I learned a great deal about, that discussion about the expertise and the contributions of the nonprofit sector in preparing the future workforce were sorely missing. We are the ones that provide soft skills to our youth. We are the ones that advance marginalized communities and promote the skills of people with all abilities, colors, and ages. These are our most promising employees, youth of color, low-income people. We advance equity, and hopefully we will start to decrease the ever-growing income gap between the wealthy and the poor. You asked So we asked to be included in the conversations because we have a lot to offer, and we have incredible experts within our sector that could really add to the conversation that is already a great conversation. You asked for something that would be innovative, and I think something that would be really innovative is 24-hour childcare. I do believe that this is a great investment for our businesses. Businesses like Wegmans and others are open late. They have employees that work all sorts of different shifts. And in order to support those employees who work 2 or 3 jobs and at varying hours, if they could have childcare, they could get to work. So again, thank you, and we look forward to using the expertise of our incredible professionals to advance these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I would like to just be clear that I do not want to be remiss in noting the nonprofit sector, right? So just even as part of NIATEP, we have close to 200 organizations that are community-based organizations that provide these services on the ground. And statewide, there's probably close to 500 providers of workforce services that really do serve special populations, but also provide that social safety net that many of those social safety nets can't provide across the state. But with that, I do want to make sure that folks have a chance to reflect on the childcare issue, but also your partnership with the nonprofit community for implementing the programs you're offering.
Absolutely. We've learned so much from the nonprofit sector, and we partner with them. We provide resources for our food pantry because we have students who are facing food insecurity, housing insecurity. To support our on-site childcare program, again, helping students to understand financial literacy as they're working with the time management of being a student and being an employee and figuring out how they're going to launch into that future. So we look to continue and expand that relationship with all of the myriad nonprofit partners that are out there.
Yeah, and I can say really the same thing. It's kind of an echo to what you said here. One of the things we did at the American Job Center, and I have 4 in my region in Lower Fairfield County, and we have a mobile as well. We've developed a position called, concierge, like you have in a hotel like this. It's to deal with people that are facing multiple barriers to employment, but can easily get distracted. I mean, it could be childcare, it could be transportation, it could be any one of a number of different things. And we're trying to respond to it in that way. And one of the more difficult ones, as you pointed out before in your remarks, is about childcare. It's expensive, and it can mean different hours, different times for different people. We are trying it. We've got contracts with some daycare centers. We've made arrangements for a countless number of people to be able to go to class or do what they had to do, and the childcare issue was addressed. But it's not an easy one to get to. It's one that is, as I said, very, very costly. But not-for-profits are a part of everything that we do in our business, and they do wonderful work. And I think one of the things that's important to mention with respect to them, they bring passion, they bring thinking, they care greatly about people, and they try to help us to understand the accommodations that would need to be made in order to address the challenges that people have. So, very much a part of our business.
So I don't want to repeat what Belinda and Joe have said, but being a nonprofit, we very much utilize lots of services of nonprofit and partner wherever and whenever we can with all of the nonprofits for a lot of the same reasons.
And I'll just sort of add on the childcare issue, it was noticeably absent from the governor's state of the state, and we'll see when the budget comes out on the 21st whether or not it's included, so stay tuned. Go towards the middle.
Yes, good morning. My name is Brenda Conley, and I'm a job developer with Catholic Charities, more specific, the Refugee Resettlement Division. And as you mentioned about the community that has been forgotten, and that's through refugee, the asylee, the person, the people, the clients that I deal with who are looking for work. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing the incentives that you have from White Plains Hospital and from the college. My question is, how can I show you, prove to you that our clients who are here in this country, who are vetted, who are they're employment ready, they're authorized to work, how can I get you to see them? They fled their country for a reason. A lot of them are educated, very educated, master's degrees, they're doctors, they're attorneys. Some of them just need an opportunity. So I guess I'm calling on all of you to not to forget that community and help them see their way of making a life here in the United States.
So actually, I think we already partner with you, and we are interviewing somebody either this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon, and that's one of many candidates that we've seen through the program. So we are more than willing to work together. We'll make sure that you have the appropriate contact information. And what I ask is, when you do have candidates or clients, that we work together to see where their skills would best fit. Sometimes what we do run into is there's training and education in other countries does not relate to what's required in the U.S., but we are working to find ways to find opportunities for them, and happy to continue to do so.
Yeah, I can say the same thing. I mean, we've got programs that deal with settlements of refugees, mostly in the area of Bridgeport and Stanford. And one of the issues that keeps on coming is that whatever their credential might have been in their native country, in many cases it's not accepted here. I mean, you could have been a doctor in many of those countries, but you can't practice here. I have been at forums that we've promoted in this field. Remember one in Pittsburgh once where someone was working at Home Depot, and this is not meant to disparage Home Depot or their employees, but he was a doctor, he was a surgeon in his own country, but his credential wasn't accepted here. We have helped hundreds to move to employment. I regret to say that I don't feel like they're doing what they should be doing, and this notion about not recognizing that credential, we don't feel as if we're really doing the best job that we can for them, but it's a tough one to overcome, and it takes a lot of time. But we're doing it, and it's really just basically the best that we can do at this point.
So the good news is that we're a large, complex organization, and the bad news is that we're a large, complex organization. Sometimes it's hard to know what the right entry point is or the point of contact. But we do have experience. I mentioned Neighbors Link as an organization that similarly works with the refugee population and partners with the college. We also are home to the Community College Consortium of Immigrant Education, which is a national movement of community colleges to work with immigrant populations that have a variety of needs. And we'd be happy to connect with you in ways that might be helpful.
Just to add a little flavor to that with some labor market data, so across the Hudson Valley, about 26 to 27% of the immigrant population is considered to have brain waste, which means they have a credential that would make them eligible for higher level employment. And about 18% of the population is foreign-born. Again, just another note to what was in the State of the State that the governor presented was a movement to actually recognize, industry-recognized credentials from other countries and start to think about that crosswalk. So that folks could be able to access employment more quickly. The other population I don't want to miss out on is veterans. And when you think about folks who are coming home from military service, I have a staff member who actually just picked her husband up from the base yesterday. Many of the credentials you receive in the military do not translate to civilian credentials. So if you are a medic, it does not mean you can be a paramedic. And so I think there's some work to be done around those, recognizing the skills and abilities of individuals who actually have meaningful skills and abilities. Other questions that we have
Can
out
I just
there?
add one thing
Yeah,
to
please,
that?
of
Being
course.
a military mom, I plead with you to give these guys and gals a chance when they come home.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, I'm going to make sure I go across the room. The woman in the red, because I can see her through the lights. All right, I'm going. Does she need this? Oh. So the question was related to, so the YWCA, I think is what I heard, around really thinking about race, equity, and inclusion in your talent pipeline management. Who wants to tackle that one?
Hi, Maria. Thank you for the question. And I'll just share with you, I didn't mention in my intro that Westchester Community College is one of the 30 community colleges in the State University of New York system. And we are what's classified by the federal government as a Hispanic serving institution. And so we are a huge, we infuse the talent pipeline with a large number of diverse students. And that federal designation is when 25% of your student population is of Latino descent. We're up to about 42% in around 7 years. So that's been a steady growth trajectory. It's really changed the way, the institution that we are, because we've tackled we've taken on the DEI agenda in a bold way. We hired our first chief diversity officer, and we've been looking at complex programming at the college to enhance our cultural competency, cultural awareness, look at our hiring practices, look at our purchasing practices, look at every aspect of the organization to make sure that we are being inclusive and that we are looking at equity, even in terms of outcomes. Who's getting the degree? Who's finishing in a timely fashion? Disaggregating our data and looking at the reality of what's going on. And so that's something that we are now able to share with others, and to our graduates are going to come to you with expectations that you have an understanding of who they are and how they can fit into your organization. So that pipeline is much more diverse than it may have been previously. And so if organizations don't have a comprehensive DEI agenda, it's important that you really understand what the expectations are, or you will not be able to recruit the talent, because the talent may look very differently than it has previously, and you may not be able to recruit them because you will have issues of match and fit that are not congruous with what their needs and realities are as they're working to help you to be successful. So it's really imperative to get on the ball with DEI.
Thanks. Anybody want to add anything, and then we'll move on? I just want to make sure there's a lot of hands. We'll go over on to the side. Right here. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't. I apologize. We cannot see very well up here. It's super bright. Okay, go ahead.
I think since I have the mic, I can speak. Is that true? Yes. Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kathy Hallis, Executive Director of the Child Care Council, and very gratified to hear child care become part of the conversation today. We do an annual survey of parents every year, and at least 50% of them tell us that child care issues impact their ability to get to work and focus at work and be productive. We also know that sometimes their ability to access child care dictates where they will accept a job. So our dilemma is this. We have free services paid for by New York State Office of Children and Family Services, and they can help employers with people they're trying to recruit, with their current workforce, and we are not working with most of the employers in this room. And I don't know, is it the fact that we're free? Is that if we were very expensive, would that help? I don't know. We would really like some feedback, because we are here to help. There are deep structural issues with regard to child care that are national in nature. We can't fix all of that, but we know that we can help some employees and folks who work for you who are low-wage earners may be eligible for financial assistance from the county. We can screen folks for you. We can actually help them apply for that assistance. Again, all free. And information about our services are on the resource table, and Jason also knows how to, link you to us. So.
Great, thank you. So go see Kathy's table after this if you're interested. Another question. I see I have no control as the moderator. Whoever has the microphone may speak.
Good morning. I'm Tara Seeley, Senior Program Officer at Westchester Community Foundation. We are so pleased to be here and to be part of this very rich conversation. I so appreciate hearing about innovation and about partnerships. Many of our nonprofit partners are in this room, and we know their work well. And some of our philanthropy partners are in this room. And I want to say that Philanthropy also has a role in this conversation. We've heard about the federal role, the state role, the business role, the nonprofit role, the training provider's role. Philanthropy's role is to catalyze innovation and to support change. And I'm very pleased to be able to announce that with some of my partners in philanthropy, some of whom are in this room today, TD Bank, NVP Health, also CIT Group, and JP Morgan Chase, we are issuing an RFP to catalyze innovation. It's on our website. We're seeking proposals as the Westchester Workforce Funders Collaborative for innovative partnerships that will provide demand-driven training for populations who are not yet connected, and we're looking for employer leadership. So we value the conversation that we've heard this morning, highlighting so many important issues, and we're really pleased to be partnering with the community to advance the conversation. All of the details are on our website, and I'll be happy to give you my business card at the close of this.
Thank you, Tara. And when it comes down to it, although we want government to be innovative, government is not known for its striking innovation. It's very risk-averse, and so philanthropy has a critical role in inspiring and sparking innovation and changing policy and practice. All right, now to this side. Tom.
Tom Kleiner, Westchester Putnam Workforce Development Board. Joe, you mentioned the untapped pools of workers available, particularly with the disability and reentry population, that we're working on at the Workforce Board, obviously, too, with grants and other means. But have you found any particular means that are successful in getting employers to really consider those difficult, sometimes difficult populations to employ, as we still have, obviously, a low unemployment rate, at least technically speaking?
Yeah, a program that we created a number of years ago called Platform to Employment was created during the recession to address the issue of long-term unemployed. That's kind of evolved over the years as long-term unemployment kind of began to lessen. And we're doing it now with older workers, and we just started to do it with the reentry population. We actually did it with the foreign-born as well. And it's got an 80% plus private sector job placement rate anywhere in the country where it's been used. And it's basically to hold employers free of all risk, so that it's to give somebody a chance. I mean, in some cases you can understand why there might be a little bit of reluctance on the part of an employer, but when you take risk off the table, if that's what's necessary to give somebody a chance, then I think you do it. So that program has yielded results for us that have just been phenomenal. In Connecticut, as an example, right now, where we're doing it statewide, the average wage is more than $51,000 a year. And I'm able to say to our legislators, in 1 year and 5 months of employment, they're going to pay back the state and state income tax what it costs Connecticut to move them from long-term unemployment, and they're all folks over 50, into employment. So applying the same principal program to the reentry population, and we got a statewide contract on that as well, and to other groups. That's the way to go, Tom. And if you want help on it, I'll help you on it. If you want to buy it, we'll sell it to you.
We've had success in with our career and technical programs where there is a practicum experience built into the curriculum. Those employers get access to our students, so they see who has the talent and the potential, and that becomes a semester-long or a year-long interview for that student, and many of them do get hired after the completion of that time. We also have, through our volunteer program at the college, where we have 600 volunteers on an annual basis come and bring their talent to the institution, a workplace mentoring and coaching initiative. So again, employers and potential employers get exposed to the talent of the students, and it gives them often an aha moment that this person has great potential, and this is a tremendous, this person has overcome tremendous obstacles to get their education, and are often given that entree into career opportunities.
Hi there, Frank Cutrone with the CCI, CPR Courses International. By trade, I actually work as a community school director with the United Federation of Teachers, and I've worked extensively. I'm currently at the Walton campus in the Bronx, but don't kick me out. I love Westchester. I'm right next to Lehman College. CPR courses, we've actually started to train high school students. There's an actual state law where we're supposed to have hands-on training for high school students all the way up through 12th grade. We're now pitching for discretionary funds with a city councilman to be able to train 3,000 students at the Walton campus, but per campus, to be able to turnkey to end up having the actual students, the high school students, turn into the trainers that'll come back and build capacity with their peers. But the caveat is those students have to be registered and actually matriculated with a CUNY, SUNY, or trade school. So I'd love to work with Westchester County, the college you guys have here, to see if we could also work with those students here at the Westchester. Just remember that even in the high school, those are the students that speak the language. Right? Many of those students are the ones that come from the community. Many of them speak Cambodian. Many of them speak Urdu, African. And in that regards, it's important to have those students that look right, just like the communities that they're actually looking to have the capacity building. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Rose Noonan. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Action Council, another representative from the nonprofit community. I've heard mention of housing affordability as being a major issue to recruit and retain employees, and we witness that ourselves in the nonprofit community. Long Island has had an employer housing assistance program for over 20 years with the involvement of more than 100 employers participating financially, combined with federal and state funding to offer housing benefits to employees. I'm asking for your comment, your interest in that type of a tool in order to help workforce development.
Comments, thoughts?
So I think we'd be totally interested in any help we can get. That is a challenge that we face from time to time, is affordable housing in Westchester County. So anything that we could do to help promote that would be wonderful.
I agree. It can't hurt. It's got to help. Let me just say we have 2 minutes and 40 seconds left here. If there's anyone really from business, actual business, that has a question, please ask it. Don't have much time. So far, we haven't had a single question from any business. I guess everything's perfect in that field. We don't have to worry about it.
Can I have some, not really business, but in combination of what everybody has said. My name is Raditya Lazar from Mindful Being. And what I'm hearing is that we have to pay more attention to the people as an individual, no matter where they are in their lives, any stage. And I feel like there is maybe flexibility that we need to increase, of like our mental flexibility, that not everything is the way we know it, and that there is a need for change in how we see things. And I feel like the panel has made some great examples of what they're doing in the field, but I think it's the companies that have to stray away from just focusing too much on like profit and how they can make a living and like make their company be number one, and see the profit in the people that they put in. Because if they focus, like the panel has mentioned, more focus on the people, then I'm sure that the profit will come with it. And I think it needs the change of the companies to actually see the humans behind the company and not the name.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to have the panel share their last thought as we close. We'll start with you.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I have the microphone here.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't see.
My name is Terry McEnany. I'm actually the general manager of the Marriott here in Westchester. So thank you all for being here. We are a profitable business. And I think the one thing that I haven't heard, and I just want to make sure, is with Marriott, I've been with the company 24 years, and I think it's, what I'm proud of the most thing is it's our culture. And I don't hear a lot about that. My job here is to keep people working every day, and that's what we do. And by doing that is providing both a service and a product for our guests. And so what I've always tried to do is, how do we keep our group and doing things that they need to do by training? So if I have a banquet server that's not working tonight, can she or he work in the restaurant tomorrow? So that's why we're trying to do here at this hotel, is that we want to make sure that everybody's always getting their hours and making sure that we're giving them what they need to do their jobs, but not only in the department that they're hired in, but in other departments throughout the building, so when there's not a breakfast in here today, they're working tomorrow. So I think, but with my company, it really starts with the culture from the top, and we're very blessed to have Mr. Marriott, but at how that filters down to everybody else. So that would be something that I would ask, what's your culture at your company look like? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we are at time, so I am going to ask the group their last sort of closing comment, and then we'll wrap up for the morning.
Sure. So thank you, everyone, for coming this morning. I know it's really difficult to give up a whole morning of a very busy work week. So I'll just summarize with a couple of thoughts. One, really look at the employees you have, reinvest in your own employees. They're your number one resource. Two, I think we heard today about respect in people. That is key, and it goes an awfully long way. And finally, you need to think out of the box on how to overcome the challenges that we have today. Joe.
Yeah, I would say to the fact that all the questions really came from private not-for-profits, to just be patient. There is something happening here. I'm a believer in the free markets. I serve on a committee with Jason in New York at the Federal Reserve Bank, and I think he's heard me say this as well, that there's nothing wrong with profit. And I think at this point, with the skill shortage, the people shortage, frankly, with the rapid pace of change among commerce, I think you're going to see, from the standpoint of self-interest, a movement towards investment in people and workers. I think businesses of all types and sizes 10 years from now are going to hear the heat, the real message that you heard this morning from me, and I think here, certainly from others too, is that you can't leave it to government to do it for you. The way that you're going to protect your share of the market through your R&D investment, you're going to do the same with respect to the talent that you need. And if that being the case, it'll be for self-interest, that you're going to see growing investment in workforce development by employers. And that would be the greatest day. I mean, I've been in this all my life, and I never thought I would see a day like this, but I see a strong economy ahead. I see continued growth in terms of the employment market. I mean, when you're at 3.5, you're long past full employment. I mean, it's not easy to find people with the relevant skills. So I once again say, be patient. I think the force is underway. It may take a while, but I think the grandest days of social justice are before us.
Dr. Miles.
Yes, and so I was really intrigued by Jason's economic forecast data. It shows that we cannot rely solely on Wall Street. That's going to continue to be a viable entity in what drives our economy regionally, but there is this emerging tech dynamic and this whole new gig economy that we need to be aware of, and who would have predicted that this would be the emerging area? So how do we recruit the talent to New York, to Westchester County, that can help us to grow and continue the innovation in that sector is key, and how do we grow our own? There's a huge gap between folks who are cycling into our state from the best MBA programs in the nation, and those who are in that asset-limited, income-constrained reality, looking for childcare, looking for affordable housing, looking for ways that they can have economic mobility. So having that consciousness to make that investment and making that part of your strategic plans will only help us in the region.
And I'll sort of close by saying, I hope you care about this because your economic competitiveness matters, right? And 100 years ago, our economic competitiveness was that we had the most highly skilled workforce in the world, and that has shifted and changed. And so I think as was shared, there's going to be market forces, there are going to be government forces. There's a doubling down moment that we have right now to sort of shift the narrative, but also to address income inequality. So with that, have a great morning. I'm going to turn it back over to Jason, who I think has a few closing remarks.
So let's see, Bill Mooney is here, and so I have to say the weather cooperated. We covered much more than I had hoped, and we also finished early. So Bill, you would say that's a wow? Okay. Our speakers did a fantastic job. We also got some great questions and comments from the audience. They shared great information and discussed many innovative programs, services, strategies, and ideas. Let's give them another round of applause. Very briefly, everybody should know before leaving today that WCA and our partners plan to do much more to advance workforce development, and we welcome you to join us. Finally, the time is right to think bigger and bolder. According to Indeed, there are more than 20,000 open positions within 25 miles of this hotel that pay an average of $50,000 per year. Many of those positions can be filled more quickly and at less cost if we align, link, and leverage our programs, services, and resources. Let's work together to fill those positions before next year's summit. That will not only help the job seekers, their families, their communities, and employers, but it will generate hundreds of millions of dollars in regional economic development each year. Let's make it happen. Thank you.
I don't know if I do, but I vote.
Great job. Thank you very much.